Get on the ground! Do you not listen? Get on the ground!
Mr. Gaillard attempts to comply with Officer Dukes' orders by getting onto his hands and knees, but Officer Dukes forcefully uses his foot to attempt to force Mr. Gaillard all the way to the ground, causing his head to violently hit the pavement. In the 1989 case of Graham versus Connor, the Supreme Court explained that the Fourth Amendment requires a police officer's use of force to be quote-unquote reasonable under the circumstances, and identified 3 factors that courts should consider when determining whether an instance of force was reasonable.
They slammed my head down on the cement. Yeah.
Go back inside. Go back in the house. Go back in the house. Ain't nobody talking to you.
I got head trauma.
Go back in the house.
Yeah. Y'all bust my head down. Yeah, I've been in an accident. Yeah, y'all bust my head down. You threw me down.
I sure did. You wasn't listening.
Yeah. No, it ain't. You had to throw me down like that. I'm disability.
Okay.
I got head problem. Yeah. You threw me down. Yeah. You throw me down. You throw me down. Yep, you bust my head down on the cement.
Hi. Good, how are you? What's going on?
Officer slammed my forehead down in the cement.
Okay.
In the wrong place.
Did you consciousness?
Yeah. Listen.
Can I get a card for me?
I don't have one there. We don't have one. They don't give us cards.
Okay, what's your badge number?
1059.
Let me see if I can get my phone.
Hold on. We have cards.
I get ready.
Okay. Thank you.
Go to hospital?
When Mr. Julian asks Officer Dukes for a business card, Officer Dukes claims they are not issued cards by their department. However, Sergeant Polidor immediately corrects Officer Dukes, states that they do have cards, and provides Mr. Julian with the information he requested. If it was concluded that Officer Dukes intentionally lied to Mr. Julian in an attempt to avoid accountability for his actions, it is possible that he could be convicted of 2 common law crimes under South Carolina law: obstruction of justice and official misconduct. In the 1997 case of State versus Lyles Gray, a court of appeals in South Carolina upheld convictions for both of these offenses against an officer in the Camden Police Department for her conduct during a criminal investigation. The court explained that, quote, under common law obstruction of justice, it is an offense to do any act which prevents, obstructs, impedes, or hinders the administration of justice, and that, quote, misconduct in office occurs when persons in public office fail to properly and faithfully discharge a duty imposed by law. After Mr. Gaillard was treated by EMS, he and Mr. Julian were allowed to leave. 2 days after the incident, Officer Dukes was fired from the Orangeburg Department of Public Safety for violating the department's use of force policies, which, as stated before, are not publicly available. On August 25, 2021, former Officer Dukes was charged with first-degree assault and battery, which could carry a sentence of up to 10 years in prison. As of the date of this episode, Mr. Gaillard is represented by an attorney, but he has not yet taken any legal action against Officer Dukes or the department. Overall, former Orangeburg Officer Dukes gets an F for physically assaulting Mr. Gaillard for no apparent reason, blatantly lying about the nature of the interaction in his police report, and for making a concerted effort to avoid being held accountable for his ridiculous antics. At no point during this encounter was Mr. Dukes in any danger, and it is clear that his violent actions were motivated by his ego, not officer or civilian safety. There was absolutely no legitimate excuse for shoving Mr. Gaillard's face into the pavement when it was plainly obvious that he was attempting to surrender. And this is exactly the type of conduct that has sparked nationwide unrest regarding members of law enforcement. Mr. Dukes' feeble attempts to explain his actions and manipulate the facts of the encounter only add to his incredulous and insidious behavior, and his conduct was nothing short of unacceptable. I commend the Orangeburg Department of Public Safety for immediately firing Mr. Dukes and pursuing criminal charges against him. And if there were a lower grade than an F, he certainly deserves that. Sergeant Polidor gets an A+ for remaining truthful and objective throughout the encounter, ensuring that Mr. Julian was given the necessary information to follow up on the incident, and for maintaining a calm, collected, and professional attitude throughout the interaction. Although it cannot be proven with any degree of certainty, I suspect that Sergeant Polidor was highly involved in the Orangeburg Department's decision to fire and charge Mr. Dukes, and the testimony that she offered in her incident report likely played a vital role in making certain that he was held accountable for his actions. Officers who witness acts of misconduct misconduct are often placed in a position where they must consider whether reporting that misconduct is worth the potential damage to their career that could arise from pursuing accountability for the actions of their colleagues. And it is all too common to see members of law enforcement justify the actions of their peers in any way they can to avoid facing the repercussions of speaking out against them. This notion was on full display in this very interaction when Sergeant Meyer fist bumped Mr. Dukes for an appropriate use of force without knowing any of the details beyond what Mr. Dukes had told him. I commend Sergeant Polidor for having the courage and conviction to hold Mr. Dukes accountable for his actions, and I sincerely hope that her actions inspire other officers who witness misconduct to come forward and do the same within their department.